Passion and pride are fueling Boston's resurgence under interim head coach Joe Sacco.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoke to Be. Today is Wednesday, December 4th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's podcast, we're going to be discussing last night's 3-2 overtime victory over the Detroit Red Wings, and we'll also preview tonight's game against the Chicago Blackhawks. Before we get into all that, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on YouTube, on your favorite podcast app, so please do hit that subscribe button so that you never miss a thing. You can also find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. You can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. I am a lifelong Boston Bruins fan. I've been covering this team for various outlets for 19 years now. I covered the NHL, hockey for The Score for 5 years, and have been hosting this podcast since 2019. All right, let's get into last night's win over Detroit. Initially, I thought the Bruins kind of escaped with the win, seeing as Alex DeBrincat went down in what appeared to be a missed penalty call on David Pastrnak. But when you break it down, look at it, it's clear that DeBrincat was searching or fishing for a call there. And that's something that Nikita Zadorov highlighted with respect to another Red Wings player after the game. And the big storyline last night was Zadorov. For my money, that was his best game in black and gold. He scored his second goal for the Bruins in this one. His first on a goalie. The other one came on an empty netter. He had a ton of shot attempts, ton of hits. Yes, he had some penalty issues, but that was kind of offsetting in the case of a couple of those calls. And the reality is he embodied kind of what is behind Boston's resurgence here under interim head coach Joe Sacco. And after the game, Zadorov said that he just feels as though the Bruins are playing with more passion and pride. They're 5-2 now under Joe Sacco. And he said, I think we're playing for each other. He said, quote, I thought we were disconnected before. That's what wasn't working. I don't think we fixed much X's and O's. It's the same system, same game plans, just doing it better this time. End quote. And that kind of speaks to the fact that under head coach Jim Montgomery, things were just a bit disconnected. And it's not necessarily the former head coach's fault. It's partly a function of bringing in some new faces, of having a discombobulated training camp where your star goaltender was not present, where your captain and your best player were not coming in 100% because of a lack of summer training due to injuries and surgeries. So on one hand, it does take time for a team to come together, especially when there's a bunch of new faces in the mix. But also at the same time, you're kind of seeing that simplified game plan where the Bruins aren't looking as much for shot quality anymore, but they're looking for just getting the puck on net, simplifying that game plan. And you saw Zadorov with the rocket from the point to score that goal to bring the Bruins level with Detroit at that point. And it was a huge, huge moment for the team and for Zadorov personally, as he tries to find his footing and also just emerges as a guy that we as Bruins fans like to watch and not just lament the fact that he's taking all these penalties and what have you. Again, he did take a slashing penalty against Lucas Raymond. We'll discuss that in a moment. The other penalty was offsetting with Ben Sherratt. And then he also had, no, I think that was it. The slashing, roughing with Ben Sherratt, and then another roughing against Ben Sherratt. So he got the double minor for roughing there. And then the slash, which he kind of called Lucas Raymond out of the Detroit Red Wings. This is a guy with whom he has history. In February of this year, Zadorov, when he was with the Canucks, was suspended 2 games for delivering an illegal check to the head against Raymond. He slashed Raymond last night, and Raymond was seen kind of shaking his hand, and Zadorov didn't like that. He said he barely touched his hand, and that's got to get out of the league. He said, quote, "It's a man's league. We all get slashed. We're all in pain. You don't go like that and show the referee that you get slashed. It's a little bit disrespectful." So a little bit of residual bad blood, perhaps, from the incident back in February. And he believes the referees also share a similar sentiment about the trend of players kind of exaggerating those reactions, although Raymond, in this instance, was not called for embellishment or anything like that. Zadorov did have 3 penalties, which is a negative, but altogether, he was a net positive for the Bruins last night. Again, he had such a great game offensively, defensively, skating alongside Brandon Carlo now, which is perhaps a new shutdown pairing that the Bruins can count on. Zadorov said, it's not just him. All the guys fight on and off the ice to help each other, and all guys are helping one at this point. If one guy makes a mistake, all the guys are going to jump in and clean up after them, and that's a main change from the start of the year. The Bruins have benefited from Joe Sacco taking over. There's no doubt about it. They are now 5-2 in games played with Joe Sacco behind the bench. Although it should be noted, they haven't exactly had the toughest schedule, and things might ramp up a bit here next week as they go on a Western road trip through Canada and also into Seattle. You look at the games they've played since Joe Sacco took over. They had the 1-0 win over Utah, 2 wins over Detroit, the Islanders, Canadians. These are all teams that are outside of the playoff picture at the moment around the NHL. They have yet to play a team that would be considered, a contender. Perhaps they played that game against Vancouver. They're a playoff team, and they were withheld they were held without a goal in that one. Right now, Vancouver is 3rd in the Pacific, but the other teams they played, Utah, the Islanders, the Red Wings, the Penguins, they're all outside of the playoff picture. So the Bruins haven't been super tested at this point, and that will change as they will head out west next week to play the likes of Winnipeg, Seattle, Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton. Tonight they play the Chicago Blackhawks. It's a game we'll preview later on in the podcast. And we will also break down some stats and storylines from last night's game here as the podcast continues. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and you can get in the action with a fantastic starter deal right now. New customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more in order to better inform your wagers. And again, you put down that $5, and if you win, you'll get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. So go to fanduel.com right now. Look at the over-under for tonight's Bruins Blackhawks game. It's set at 5.5. Put $5 down. If you win, you'll get that $150 in bonus bets. It's all available at fanduel.com. So join today. That's fanduel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, let's break down some key stats and signals from last night's win over the Detroit Red Wings. I mentioned Zadorov chipping in with the goal, his second of the season, his first on a goaltender, the other one coming on an empty net. He also had 4 shots on goal, which I believe was a team high, and also had 8 attempts, 4 hits. So he was just filling the stat sheet last night for the Boston Bruins, which is great to see. The Bruins really need to see him continue that trend of being physical, contributing offensively, and being a net positive. He did have the 6 minutes and penalties that need to be cut down on, but overall, a positive for the Bruins. Actually, Justin Brazeau had 5 shots on goal for the Bruins last night. He also had a huge third period power play goal. We all know the Bruins' issues this season, scoring in the third period, especially on home ice, as well as their struggles on the power play. Brazeau from Lori and Frederick, who got some power play time last night. That was a massive, massive goal for the Boston Bruins. A tip in off that Lori shot, which propelled this game to overtime, where the Bruins eventually prevailed on a goal from Pavel Zacha, who thankfully is heating up here a little bit. That goal was assisted by David Pastrnak, who continues to struggle to find the back of the net, seemingly a bit tentative to shoot or not as much juice on his shot. He did have 4 shots on goal last night, but no goals again. And, you know, he did score on Sunday against the Canadiens, but there have been lengthy goal droughts for this guy this season. Only 1 goal since November 14th. So beginning on the 16th of November, since that time, he's only had 1 goal, which is really, not what we expect of Pastrnak. He has had a lot of shots on goal, and his shooting percentage is down from his career average and what he's achieved over the past couple seasons, where he scored 60 and he's challenged for 50. So hopefully some confidence can be gained from that game-ending play last night with Pavel Zacha. Great to see the 2 Czechs teaming up. The 4 nations rosters will be announced today. It's still egregious to me that Czechia, as the world champions, will not be in that tournament, especially with games being played in Boston and David Pastrnak not being able to represent his home country on his home NHL ice. But that's a conversation for another day. Tomorrow we'll break down which Bruins have made those rosters. I'm sure we'll see at least a few there between Marchand, we already know, McAvoy, probably Swayman, maybe some others as well. Overall, last night, Detroit kind of had the advantage here in terms of, maybe not in terms of shots and attempts. The Bruins in all situations last night leading the way with 35 shots compared to 26 for the Red Wings. They had 54% of the shot attempts, but Detroit had the advantage in terms of scoring chances. They had 58% of the scoring chances, 71.4% of the high danger chances, and they led in expected goals, 2.11 compared to 1.42 for the Bruins. So the Bruins coming out on top of this one when perhaps they didn't really dominate when it comes to scoring chances, high danger chances, and expected goals, although they did have the shot advantage, which is something that I mentioned earlier that has changed under Joe Sacco. Whereas before they went for high quality shots over quantity, now they're just firing more from anywhere, trying to get some tips, some traffic in front of the net. And we saw that succeed on both the Zadorov goal from the point and the Brazeau tip in from that Mason Lohrei shot. So what can we take away from this game moving forward? Well, again, the Bruins making steps forward under head coach Joe Sacco. But again, they haven't really played the highest quality of competition. Only one team in a playoff spot over the past 7 games, 6 opponents that they've played. Detroit's out of a playoff spot. Montreal not in a playoff spot. They lost to Pittsburgh, who is the worst team in the Eastern Conference. They beat the Islanders, who are outside of the playoff picture. They beat Utah, who's outside of the playoff picture, and then lost to Vancouver, although you could argue they should have won that or could have won that game if not for Kevin Lankinen. So the quality of competition hasn't been there. To the Bruins' credit, they have taken advantage of what's being presented to them, with the exception of that Pittsburgh game. I really lament not taking advantage of that game. And if they fall a couple points short, you can look back at that one and think that's one they should have had. Tonight's opponent is another game they should win, playing against a Blackhawks team that does feature a ton of former Bruins, as we'll discuss here in a moment. But overall, the Bruins right now, third in the Atlantic in terms of total points. They have 29 points, 3 back of Florida and Toronto. But, of course, they do have the most games played. So if you look at point percentage, they are currently 4th. But with Detroit losing last night, with Buffalo losing last night, they've both lost 2 in a row. They've both fallen below 500. And the Sabres lost Rasmus Dahlin last night. He's got some back spasms, so that will certainly affect their efforts moving forward as well. But where you got to watch is the Metropolitan Division, where there are 6 teams above 500 right now, and 5 of them better than the Bruins, beginning with Philadelphia, who the Bruins will play on Saturday. The Rangers, they're struggling, but they're still up there. Devils, Hurricanes, Capitals. The Blue Jackets lost last night to fall to a point percentage of .521, but they're still in the thicket of it as well. So when you rank the teams in the East by way of point percentage, the Bruins are currently in 9th with a minus 15 goal differential. So still some work to do. They cannot afford to take for granted games against inferior opponents like the Chicago Blackhawks, and we'll preview that game here as the podcast continues. You can run your game all season long with Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. It's the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. And it's the best place to get real money sports action. They put their members first. All withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. And when your picks hit, you can get your money in as quick as 15 minutes. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download Prize Picks, use code LOCKEDONNHL, and get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. So the Bruins will be in Chicago tonight to take on the Blackhawks, a team that last played on Monday in a game against the Maple Leafs, losing by a score of 4-1. So they'll be a bit more rested than our Bruins, who are coming off a game last night and who have to travel to Chicago for this one. It's a 7:30 p.m. start. And with the time difference, it's really 6:30 for Chicago. It's the first of two meetings between these two teams. They'll play again in Boston on April 10th. And there is a ton of faces that we are going to recognize in this one, including their leading goal scorers. 3 of their leading goal scorers, actually 5 of their top 6 goal scorers, are all former Boston Bruins. You have Ryan Donato leading the way with 10 goals for the Blackhawks. Nick Foligno, their new captain, has 7 goals. Craig Smith has 6 goals. Tyler Bertuzzi with 5 goals. And Taylor Hall also with 5 goals. Oh, and don't forget, you also have Pat Maroon down there with 1 goal, 7 assists for 8 points through 22 games. So a ton of Bruins to keep an eye out for. That's 2 full lines of former Bruins that the Blackhawks feature at the moment. Now, they have lost 3 in a row, 4 of their last 5. They're 3-6-1 over their past 10 games. And still, they do have pretty decent goaltending that you have to try to continue this trend of getting pucks on net, getting some tips, getting some traffic, and going for volume. They have Peter Mrazek, who's 7-10-1 with a .908 save percentage. Arvid Soderblom with a .919 save percentage, although he's only 1-5-1. So they're not really getting a ton of goal scoring to back up this solid goaltending. It will be Jeremy Swayman in net, as Joonas Korpisalo last night got the win. He's now 6-2-1 with a .909 save percentage. Swayman looking to get his personal record back closer to 500. He's 7-9-2 with an .892 save percentage. Now, Chicago does struggle to score despite those goal totals from former Bruins. They rank 30th in the NHL, averaging 2.48 goals per game. The Bruins, that's the Bruins. They're at 30th right now, 2.48 goals per game. The Blackhawks slightly behind at 3.44 goals per game, or 2.44 goals per game, I should say. Boston's team defense slightly better than Chicago's as well, 3.04 goals allowed per game. The Blackhawks allowing 3.12 goals per game. So if you look at these two teams, you'd expect, well, the Bruins are obviously better than Chicago Blackhawks. But if you look at their goals for and against per game, they're very, very close to each other. Boston's power play up to 31st. Hurrah. Their penalty kill is 19th. Chicago's special teams, not too bad. They have a 10th ranked power play, 23.5%. Again, Boston's is only at 12.4%. Their penalty kill, Chicago's is 14th, 80.3%. The Bruins are 19th at 79.2%. You, of course, also have to keep an eye on Connor Bedard. He leads the team in scoring, total points, 19, although he's only stuck on 5 goals. So he's a guy that could always get going for this team. Over their past 5 games, he does have 4 points to lead the way. Taylor Hall with 3 goals. He had a hat trick the other night. Tyler Bertuzzi with 3 assists. For the Bruins, it's David Pastrnak with 5 points over his last 5 games. Sacco with 3 goals over the past 5 to lead the Bruins. Pasta only with 1 goal, 4 assists. So it should be a very entertaining game between these two teams tonight. Again, a 7:30 p.m. Eastern start. The Blackhawks, not a playoff team. Much further down the standing. Well, not much further down the standings, I don't think, than the Boston Bruins. Right now, you look at total points in the NHL. The Bruins rank, let's see here, 13th when it comes to total points in the NHL. The Blackhawks last in the NHL when it comes to points, 18 points. They're also last in the NHL in point percentage at .360. The Bruins' point percentage is .537. So this is a game they should win. Their goal differentials are very similar, though. Chicago at -16, Boston still at -15. Only Chicago, San Jose, Nashville, Montreal, and Pittsburgh are worse. So add it all up, and this is a game that should count for the Bruins. That should be won for the Boston Bruins. All right. And then they get a couple days off before hosting the Flyers on Saturday and then heading out west. On tomorrow's podcast, we'll bring you all the storylines, signals, and stats from tonight's game. We'll discuss the Four Nations selections and bring you all the latest on the black and gold. Please do check out Locked On Fantasy Hockey next. They'll get all the tips that you need to give you the edge over the competition this week. Steal and Flip will, of course. And also, please do subscribe to the podcast if you have not already. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day. Please do take care of yourselves, friends. Take care of each other. And we'll talk to you here on the next episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.